The cook answered a call in Arabic in front of the mansion's owner. The next day, Jasmine had been working as a cook in the Thompson mansion for just 3 months when everything changed drastically. Her quiet, routine life was about to be completely turned upside down because of a simple phone call. The yellow kitchen phone rang exactly at 3 in the afternoon on that rainy March Thursday in New York City. Jasmine was preparing the special dinner Mr. Richard Thompson had requested for his important guests when she answered without a second thought. The voice on the other end spoke in Arabic, and she responded naturally in her mother tongue. That's when she noticed Richard's piercing gaze standing at the kitchen door, watching every word she said, with an expression that mixed surprise and something else she couldn't decipher. "Yes, I understood perfectly," Jasmine said in Arabic, holding the yellow phone with a trembling hand. "I'll do what I can, but I need time." Richard Thompson remained still, his impeccable dark suit contrasting with Jasmine's white apron. At 58, he had built an empire in the import-export business, and his mansion in the Upper East Side reflected his success. But at that moment, something about that phone call had stirred old painful memories. When Jasmine hung up, the silence in the modern kitchen was deafening. Her brown eyes met his, and for a moment, neither spoke. Richard adjusted his navy blue tie and cleared his throat. "You speak Arabic very well," he remarked, trying to sound casual. "Where did you learn?" "I was born in Lebanon, Mr. Richard," Jasmine replied, returning to chopping the vegetables. "I came to the United States 15 years ago." "I see," Richard said, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Carry on with dinner. The guests will arrive at 8. Jasmine watched as he left the kitchen with hurried steps. Something about that call had shaken him in a way she didn't understand. The person on the other end was her cousin Fatima, calling from Lebanon with worrying news about her elderly mother's health. But why had Richard reacted like that? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The next day, Jasmine arrived at the mansion at 6 in the morning. As she always did, the sky was still dark, and a thin mist covered the perfectly manicured gardens. She used her back door key and entered through the service area, surprised to find all the house lights on. In the main living room, she found Richard sitting on the leather couch, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. Empty water bottles littered the coffee table, and papers were scattered everywhere. Old photographs, yellowed documents, and what looked like handwritten letters. "Mr. Richard?" Jasmine called hesitantly. "Are you all right?" He lifted his tired, red-rimmed eyes and stared at her for long seconds. In his hands, he held a faded photo of a young woman wearing a hijab. "Jasmine," he began, his voice hoarse, "I need you to tell me the truth. Who called yesterday? What did they want?" "It was my cousin Fatima," she answered honestly. "My mother is sick in Lebanon. Fatima wanted to know if I could send money to help with the treatment." Richard closed his eyes and ran a hand over his face. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "What is your mother's full name?" "Nadia Farah," Jasmine replied, confused by the turn in the conversation. The glass Richard was holding slipped from his hands and shattered on the marble floor. He turned pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Nadia," he murmured. "After all these years?" Jasmine rushed to grab a broom, but Richard held her by the arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "Your mother, did she ever mention living in New York City? A long time ago? Maybe 40 years back?" Jasmine's heart raced. How could he know that? "Yes," she confirmed slowly. "She lived here when she was young. She worked for a wealthy family but never wanted to talk much about that time." Richard released her arm and sat back down, his legs seeming to give way beneath him. He picked up the old photo and handed it to Jasmine. "Is this your mother?" Jasmine took the photo with trembling hands. Despite the years and the fading, there was no doubt. It was Nadia, much younger, smiling shyly at the camera. How do you have a picture of her?" Richard took a deep breath before answering. "Because 40 years ago, I fell in love with her and she loved me. But my family..." He paused, guilt evident in every word. "My family would never accept it. I was the only son, heir to everything. She was the cook. Jasmine felt her legs wobble and leaned against the wall. The puzzle pieces were falling into place painfully. That's why she went back to Lebanon, she whispered. She never said it, but I always knew she'd left something important here. It wasn't just that, Richard continued, tears now streaming freely down his face. She was pregnant when she left. The silence that followed was devastating. Jasmine felt the world spinning around her. No, it couldn't be true. What are you saying? She managed to ask. I'm saying I spent 40 years looking for her. I hired detectives, traveled to Lebanon 3 times, but it was like she'd vanished. My family was relieved, said it was for the best. They married. Me off to Victoria. We had a respectable life, but I never forgot Nadia. Jasmine slid to the floor, still clutching the photo. Her mind raced, trying to process the information. Her mother had always been evasive about Jasmine's father, saying only that he was a man who couldn't take responsibility. How old are you, Jasmine? Richard asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. 39, she replied in a thin voice. Were you born in September? The 15th. Richard covered his face with his hands. The math was simple and devastating. Jasmine would have been conceived exactly when Nadia left New York City. My God, he murmured. What have I done? Jasmine stood abruptly, the photo slipping from her hands. No, this couldn't be happening. She'd gotten that job on her own merit, through an agency. It was just a cruel twist of fate. I have to go, she said, removing her apron. I can't deal with this right now. Jasmine, wait! Richard stood too. Please, we need to talk. Talk about what? She exploded, all her confusion turning to anger. About how you abandoned my pregnant mother? About how she had to raise a child alone in a war-torn country? About how she never married because she still loved the man who rejected her? Each word was like a knife to Richard's chest. He tried to step closer, but Jasmine backed away. I didn't know she was pregnant, he said desperately. She left without saying a word. If I'd known... If you'd known what? Would you have stood up to your family? Would you have chosen love over money? Jasmine laughed bitterly. Don't give me excuses now, 40 years later. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Richard followed, pleading. Please, let me explain. Let me try to make this right. Make it right. Jasmine turned, her eyes brimming with tears. My mother is dying in Lebanon. She spent her whole life waiting for a man who never came. How? Are you going to make that right? The weight of the truth crashed down on Richard like an avalanche. Nadia was dying. The woman he had loved, the one he had let go, was dying. Let me help, he pleaded. The treatment, the doctors, whatever she needs, it's the least I can do. The least? Jasmine shook her head. The least would have been being there. The least would have been knowing me, being my father. Now it's too late. She opened the door but turned back one last time before leaving. You know the cruelest irony? I grew up hearing stories about the United States. My mother spoke of this country as if it were a lost paradise. She taught me English, told me about the food, the people. Because of her, I came here. Because of her, I ended up working in your home. Fate has a cruel sense of humor, don't you think? With that, she walked out, leaving Richard alone in his empty mansion, surrounded by memories of a love he had let slip away and the consequences of his choices. Jasmine drove aimlessly through the streets of New York City, tears making it hard to see the road. She needed to call her mother, needed to hear the truth from her lips. But how do you confront a dying woman with a secret kept for 40 years? She pulled into an empty parking lot and grabbed her phone. It was 4 a.m. in Lebanon, but she knew Nadia barely slept these days because of the pain. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. Jasmine? Her mother's weak voice answered after a few rings. My daughter, why are you calling so early? Mom, Jasmine began, her voice breaking. I need you to tell me the truth about my father. The silence on the other end was long and heavy. Why now, Habibti? Why after all this time? Because I know who he is, Jasmine replied. Richard Thompson. I work in his house, Mom. How could you let this happen? She heard Nadia take a deep breath. Fate has its own plans, my daughter. I didn't know you were working for him. If I had... Why didn't you ever tell me? Why all these secrets? To protect you, Nadia answered, her voice growing stronger with emotion. Richard is a good man, but he had obligations, a family that would never have accepted me. I loved him too much to force him to choose, so I chose for him. I left. But you were pregnant. I only found out when I arrived in Lebanon. By then it was too late. What could I have done? Gone back and destroyed his life? Been the Arabic mistress who tried to trap the heir with a child? No, my daughter. I had my pride. Jasmine rested, her head on the steering wheel, trying to process decades of pain and sacrifice. He looked for you, she said finally. He never forgot. There was a long silence before Nadia responded, her voice now thick with tears. He looked. For years, he said. He hired detectives, went to Lebanon. I changed my name, Nadia confessed. I used my mother's maiden name. I didn't want to be found. I thought it would be easier that way for all of us. Easier? Jasmine couldn't contain the bitterness. I grew up without a father because you thought it would be easier. You grew up free, Nadia corrected firmly, without the burden of being the rich man's illegitimate child, without the shadow of scandal. You grew up being just Jasmine, my beloved daughter, not someone's past mistake. Her mother's words struck deep. She understood, even as she hated understanding, a mother's sacrifice to shield her daughter from rejection and prejudice. He wants to help with your treatment, Jasmine said after a moment. No, Nadia replied quickly. I don't want his money. Not now, not like this. Mom, you need the best doctors. What I need is to die in peace, knowing my daughter is strong and independent. I don't want his belated charity. What if it's not charity, Jasmine argued. What if it's, I don't know, his way of trying to make peace with the past? The past can't be changed, Habibti. I'll just accept it. They talked. For a few more minutes, Nadia visibly growing more tired. Before hanging up, she said something that would stay etched in Jasmine's mind. If you see him again, don't judge him too harshly. We were young, living in a world that didn't accept our love. He did what he thought was right at the time. Just like I did. Jasmine spent the rest of the night wide awake in her small apartment in Astoria. The walls that once felt cozy now felt suffocating. Her entire life had been built on half-truths and secrets. In the morning, her phone rang insistently. It was the number from the mansion. She let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, it rang again and again. On the fifth call, she answered. Jasmine. It was Margaret, the housekeeper. Thank God you picked up. Mr. Richard, he's not well. What happened? Jasmine asked, her heart tightening despite everything. He stayed up all night drinking. Now he's locked himself in the study and won't respond. Mrs. Victoria is traveling and we don't know what to do. Could you come? He only says your name. Jasmine closed her eyes. All she wanted was to run from this situation, to pretend nothing had happened. But something inside her, perhaps the same compassion she'd inherited from her mother, wouldn't let her abandon a man in despair, even if that man was the father she'd never known. I'm on my way, she finally said. The drive to the Upper East Side had never felt so long. Every traffic light was an opportunity to change her mind, every street a chance to turn back. But she kept going, guided by a sense of duty she couldn't explain. When she arrived at the mansion, the house was in chaos. Staff whispered in corners, clearly worried. Margaret, a woman in her 60s who had worked for the family for decades, rushed to meet her. He's been in there since yesterday, she explained as they walked. After you left, he locked himself in. We heard things breaking, then silence. We tried forcing the door, but he shouted at us to leave him alone. Jasmine stopped in front of the heavy wooden door of the study. She could hear music playing inside, a melancholic Arabic melody she recognized immediately. It was one of her mother's favorites. Mr. Richard, she called, knocking lightly. It's me, Jasmine. Please open the door. The music stopped abruptly. There was a long silence before he answered. Go away. All of you. Just go away. The others are gone, Jasmine lied, motioning for Margaret to step back. It's just me. Please, we need to talk. Talk? His voice was hoarse, clearly slurred by alcohol. 40 years too late for talking. Jasmine pressed her forehead against the door, searching for the right words. "I spoke with my mother," she said softly. "She told me everything about you, about why she left. She doesn't hold a grudge, Mr. Richard. She understood." She heard footsteps approaching the door, but it didn't open. "Is she really sick?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Yes, advanced stage cancer. The doctors give her a few months, maybe less." A muffled sob came from the other side of the door. "I looked for her," he said desperately. "I swear I did. I went to Lebanon 3 times, hired the best detectives. It was like she'd vanished." "She changed her name," Jasmine explained, "used her grandmother's maiden name. She thought it was for the best." "For the best?" Richard laughed bitterly. "I lost 40 years, I lost you, I lost everything that truly mattered because of pride and fear." Jasmine heard the sound of a key turning, and the door slowly opened. Richard was unrecognizable. The always impeccable businessman now had wrinkled clothes, red and swollen eyes, and an unshaven face. The study behind him was destroyed, papers scattered, empty bottles, shattered picture frames. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "Please." Jasmine entered cautiously. The office she knew as organized and imposing now looked like it had been hit by an emotional hurricane. At the center of the mess, on the desk, was an open photo album, showing more pictures of a young Nadia. "I kept everything," Richard said, following her gaze. "Every photo, every letter, every memory. Victoria never knew. I married her out of obligation, had children out of duty, built this empire out of expectation. But my heart stayed with your mother." "Why didn't you fight for her?" Jasmine asked, the question that had haunted her since the night before. Richard sank into an armchair, looking far older than his 58 years. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "My father threatened to disown me. My mother had a heart attack when I suggested marrying Nadia. The whole family mobilized against me, and I gave in. I thought love wasn't enough against all that weight." "And was it?" Jasmine challenged. "It was," he whispered. "I found out too late that it was. Without Nadia, everything else lost its meaning. The money, the prestige, the perfect family, all empty." Jasmine sat across from him, studying the man who was her father. She could see traces of herself in him, the shape of his nose, the line of his jaw. It was unsettling and painful at the same time. "What do we do now?" she finally asked. Richard lifted his eyes, hope and despair battling on his face. "Let me know her," he pleaded. "I know I don't deserve it, I know it's late, but you're my daughter with Nadia. You're everything I ever wanted and never knew I had. What about your family, your wife, your other children?" Richard ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Victoria is traveling with friends in Europe. My children. Jonathan lives in Chicago, Catherine in London. They have their own lives. Our marriage has been a facade for years." "That doesn't make things easier," Jasmine pointed out. "I'm living proof of betrayal, even if it happened before the marriage." "I don't care anymore," Richard said firmly. "I spent 40 years caring what others thought. I lost the love of my life because of it. I won't lose my daughter, too." Before Jasmine could respond, the office phone rang. Richard ignored it, but it kept ringing insistently. Finally, annoyed, he answered. "What?" he snapped. Then his face changed, going pale. "When? How did she find out?" "I see. No, I'll talk to her myself." He hung up slowly, his eyes fixed on Jasmine. "That was my lawyer. Victoria came back early from her trip. Someone told her about yesterday, about you. She's on her way here." Jasmine stood immediately. "I should go." "No," Richard said gently, taking her arm. "Please stay. It's time to end the secrets. This won't end well," Jasmine warned. "Nothing in my life has ended well since I let your mother go," he replied. "Maybe it's time to change that." They didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, they heard the sound of a car arriving at high speed, tires screeching on the gravel driveway. The front door slammed so hard it echoed through the house. "Richard!" Victoria Thompson's voice cut through the air like a razor. "Richard, I know you're in there." Richard took a deep breath and opened the office door. Victoria stood in the hallway, her perfectly made-up face twisted with rage. At 55, she maintained the elegance money could buy, but in that moment, she seemed like a force of nature. Her gaze fell on Jasmine and she froze. Victoria's eyes took in every detail, and Jasmine saw the exact moment she understood. The resemblance was subtle, but undeniable. "So it's true," Victoria said, her voice dangerously low. "The little Arabic maid is your bastard daughter." "Don't speak about her like that," Richard said firmly. "Jasmine isn't to blame for any of this." "Jasmine," Victoria repeated, the name as if it were poison. "Of course, the daughter of your Arabic mistress, the one you swore never existed." "I didn't know about Jasmine until yesterday," Richard tried to explain. "Nadia left before she could tell me." "Nadia," Victoria spat the name. "Always Nadia. 40 years of marriage, and I always knew there was another woman. I thought it was my paranoia, but no, you've kept her ghost alive all this time." Victoria took a step toward Jasmine, who instinctively retreated. "And you," she said with contempt. "Did you come for the money, is that it? Found out who your rich father was and decided to sneak into our home?" "I didn't know," Jasmine defended herself. "I found out yesterday just like him. It was a coincidence." "Coincidence?" Victoria laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "How convenient. The long-lost daughter shows up just when we need a cook." "Enough, Victoria," Richard intervened. "Jasmine has done nothing wrong. If you want to blame someone, blame me." "Oh, I do blame you," Victoria turned to him. "I blame you for making a fool of me all these years, for making me believe our marriage meant something while you were in love with someone else." "You knew our marriage was arranged," Richard said calmly. "I never pretended to feel love I didn't. But you promised respect," Victoria shouted. "You promised loyalty, and all this time, you were pining for your exotic mistress." "It wasn't like that," Richard tried to explain, but Victoria wasn't interested in listening. "I want her out of my house," she declared, pointing at Jasmine. "Now, and I want you out too. I won't be humiliated like this." "This is my house too," Richard reminded her. "We'll see what my lawyers have to say about that," Victoria threatened. 40 years of marriage, Richard. 40 years wasted. With that, she stormed out, slamming the office door so hard a picture fell off the wall. Richard and Jasmine stood in silence for a long moment, processing what had just happened. "I'm sorry," Jasmine finally said. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "The trouble has been here for 40 years, Richard replied wearily. "You just brought it all to the surface." "What will you do?" Richard looked around, the wrecked office, then at Jasmine. "What I should have done 40 years ago, I'll choose love over fear, but first..." He picked up the phone. "I need to speak to your siblings." "My... siblings?" Jasmine repeated, the reality of the situation hitting her again. "Jonathan and Catherine. They deserve to hear the truth from me, not from gossip or lawyers." As Richard made the difficult calls, Jasmine wandered around the office, observing the remnants of a life built on fragile foundations. Family photos that now seemed staged, awards and achievements that dulled in the face of the revealed truth. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her cousin Fatima in Lebanon. "Aunt Nadia is asking for you. The doctors say she doesn't have much time." Jasmine's heart tightened. Between the family drama in New York City and her dying mother, in Lebanon, she felt pulled in opposite directions. Richard finished his calls, his face even more worn. "Jonathan is coming from Chicago tomorrow. Catherine, she doesn't want to speak to me right now." "I'm sorry," Jasmine said sincerely. "It's part of the consequences." He sighed. "Jasmine, about your mother." "She's getting worse," Jasmine interrupted. "I need to go see her." "Let's go together," Richard said impulsively. Jasmine stared at him in surprise. "What?" "Let me come with you. Let me see her one last time. Ask for forgiveness, make peace, please." "I don't know if she'll want..." "Then let her send me away," Richard pleaded. "But I have to try. I owe it to her, to you, to myself." Jasmine thought of her conversation with her mother, the absence of bitterness in her voice, the love that had survived 40 years of separation. "I'll ask her," she finally agreed. "But the decision is hers." Richard nodded, hope shining in his tired eyes. But before they could continue the conversation, they heard raised voices coming from the entrance of the house. Margaret appeared at the office door, clearly agitated. "Mr. Richard, Mrs. Victoria is back and she brought your brothers." Richard paled. His two younger brothers, Michael and David, were minority partners in the family business. If Victoria had convinced them to turn against him. "Where are they?" he asked. "In the living room. They're saying they want an urgent family meeting." Richard looked at Jasmine. "You don't have to go through this. You can wait here or—" "No," Jasmine interrupted, surprised by her own firmness. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No more secrets, remember?" Richard nodded, a small smile touching his lips for the first time since the night before. "You have your mother's courage," he observed. "Let's go then." They walked together to the living room, where a small crowd awaited them. Victoria was seated on the main sofa, flanked by Michael and David. Michael's wife, Elizabeth, stood near the window, clearly uncomfortable. There was also a man in a suit whom Jasmine didn't recognize, likely a lawyer. All eyes turned to them as they entered. Jasmine felt the weight of their gazes, the mix of curiosity, hostility, and shock. Michael, a stout man of 55, was the first to speak. "So it's true. This is Jasmine, my daughter," Richard said clearly. "My daughter with Nadia Farah, whom I knew before marrying Victoria." David, the youngest at 52, shook his head in disbelief. 40 years, Richard. 40 years of lies." "I didn't know about Jasmine," Richard repeated. "I found out yesterday." "But you knew about her mother," Elizabeth interjected. "Victoria told us about the photos, the letters. You kept everything." "I did," Richard admitted without hesitation. "I loved Nadia, and I never hid that my marriage to Victoria was arranged." "Arranged but valid," Victoria exploded. "With vows and promises you broke." "I never betrayed you after we married," Richard said firmly. "Not physically," Victoria shot back, "but emotionally, you were never truly present, always distant, always looking at something I couldn't see. Now I know what it was." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this more privately." "No," Victoria cut him off. "I want everyone to know. I want this woman to understand what she represents." Jasmine stepped forward, tired of being treated like an object. "I have a name," she said with dignity, "and I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be Richard's daughter. I found out yesterday, and I'm just as shocked as you are." "Convenient," David muttered. "What do you mean by that?" Jasmine challenged. "Showing up now when Richard is in his 60s, established, wealthy?" "I don't want his money," Jasmine exploded. "I've worked my whole life. I support my mother. In Lebanon with my own efforts. I don't need any inheritance." "Everyone says that," Elizabeth remarked skeptically. "My mother is dying," Jasmine said, her voice breaking. "Terminal cancer. She kept this secret for 40 years to protect everyone. She never asked for anything, never sought Richard out, never tried to blackmail or pressure him. What kind of people do you think we are?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The silence that followed was heavy. It was Victoria who broke it, her voice surprisingly calm. "You seem like a good person," she said to Jasmine, "but understand, to me you represent everything that went wrong in my marriage. Every time I look at you, I see the woman my husband truly loved." "Victoria," Richard began. "No," she interrupted him. "Let me finish. I spent 40 years competing with a ghost, trying to be good enough, pretty enough, interesting enough to win your love. Now I find out I never stood a chance. You had already given your heart away before you even met me." The vulnerability in her voice took everyone by surprise. The strong, angry woman from moments ago now seemed fragile and tired. "I'm sorry," Richard said softly. "You deserved better." "Yes, I did," Victoria agreed. "But now, it's too late. I want a divorce, Richard. I want my share of everything, and I want to start over far away from all this." "We'll need to discuss the division of assets," the lawyer interjected. "You can have it all," Richard said, shocking everyone. "The house, the accounts, half the company. Just let me go free." Michael stood up abruptly. Have you lost your mind? The company belongs to the family. And Jasmine is my family too, Richard replied calmly. A bastard daughter. You just met yesterday, David protested. Watch your words, Richard warned, his tone dangerous. Jasmine is my daughter, period. What about Jonathan and Catherine? Elizabeth asked. Your legitimate children? They'll have their share, Richard assured. I won't abandon anyone, but I won't deny Jasmine either. I already said I don't want anything, Jasmine repeated, frustrated. It's not about wanting, Richard turned to her. It's about justice, about making things right, even if it's late. Some mistakes can't be fixed, Victoria observed bitterly. But maybe they can be forgiven. With time, a lot of time. She stood up, adjusting her designer dress. I'm going to the beach apartment. My lawyer will be in touch. Richard, I hope you find the happiness with her that you never had with me. Victoria, Richard tried again. No, she raised her hand. Don't make this harder than it already is. 40 years is long enough. For both of us. She left with dignity, followed by the lawyer. Michael and David exchanged glances before Michael spoke. This isn't over, Richard. The company, the family. You're destroying everything. I'm trying to fix it, Richard corrected. Fix it? David laughed humorlessly. You think you can fix 40 years of lies with an apology? No, Richard admitted. But I can start living truthfully from now on. The brothers left, Elizabeth following them after casting one last curious glance at Jasmine. Suddenly, the enormous living room felt even bigger with just the two of them. I'm sorry, Jasmine said. I ruined your life. My life was already ruined, Richard replied. You just showed me that and gave me a reason to rebuild it. Jasmine's phone rang again, Fatima desperate. She answered with trembling hands. Jasmine, you need to come, her cousin urged. The doctors say it's a matter of days, maybe hours. Jasmine felt the world spin. Richard, seeing her face, stepped closer. What's wrong? My mother. I need to go now. My jet is at LaGuardia Airport, Richard said immediately. We can be in Lebanon in 15 hours. Your jet? No, I can't. Please, Richard begged. Let me do this. Let me help. It's the least I can do. Jasmine looked into the eyes of the father she had just met and saw genuine desperation. He needed this as much as she did. Okay, she agreed, but I need to grab a few things from home. I'll send a car. Go, do what you need to. We'll meet at the airport in 2 hours. Jasmine nodded and hurried out. Richard stood alone in the empty room, contemplating the wreckage of his carefully constructed life. But for the first time in 40 years, he felt he was doing the right thing. 2 hours later, they were on the private jet, taking off for Beirut. Jasmine had never traveled in such luxury, but she barely noticed the details. Her mind was with her mother. Every passing minute could be crucial. Richard sat across from her, lost in thought. Tell me about her, he asked softly. What has her life been like? Jasmine hesitated, then began to speak. She told him about her childhood in Lebanon, how Nadia had worked as a seamstress to support them, about the bombings during the war, the nights in shelters, her mother's determination to give her an education. She never married, Richard asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. There were suitors, Jasmine replied, good men who courted her, but she always said her heart already belonged to someone. Richard covered his face with his hands. I don't deserve that kind of love. No one does, Jasmine mused. Love isn't about deserving, it's about choice. She chose to love you, even from afar. And you? Richard asked. Could you ever forgive me? Jasmine looked out the plane. Window, the clouds passing like fleeting thoughts. I don't know, she answered honestly. Part of me understands we were all victims of circumstance, but another part, I grew up without a father. I saw my mother cry on stormy nights when she thought I was asleep. I watched her save for months to buy a new dress because she sewed for others but never for herself. I would have helped, but you weren't there, Jasmine finished, and that made all the difference. They traveled in silence for a while, each lost in their own regrets and missed possibilities. When the plane began its descent over the Mediterranean, approaching Beirut, Richard spoke again. What happens next? After we see your mother? I don't know, Jasmine admitted. One day at a time, maybe. I'd like to get to know you better, Richard said hopefully, if you'll let me. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to be the father I should have been. We'll see, was all Jasmine could promise. The hospital in Beirut was a stark contrast to the luxury of the jet. Crowded hallways, outdated equipment, the scent of disinfectant failing to mask. Less pleasant odors, but Jasmine barely noticed rushing through the familiar corridors to her mother's room. Fatima stood at the door, her eyes widening when she saw Richard. Jasmine, who is... It's a long story, Jasmine said quickly. How is she? Awake but weak. The doctors increased her morphine. She's been waiting for you. Jasmine stepped into the room, her heart clenching at how much her mother had deteriorated in just a few weeks. Nadia lay in the hospital bed, hooked to machines, but her eyes brightened when she saw her daughter. Habibti, she whispered. Ah, you came. Of course I did, Jasmine said, holding her mother's fragile hand. Mom, I brought someone. Nadia's gaze shifted to the door, where Richard hesitated. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met after 40 years. Richard, Nadia breathed, and it wasn't clear if it was a question or a statement. He took an unsteady step into the room. Nadia. My God, Nadia, forgive me. For what? She asked, a ghost of a smile on her dry lips. For being young, for being afraid. We were all afraid back then. Richard moved closer to the bed, tears streaming freely down his face. For not fighting for you, for letting you go, for missing all of this. He looked between Nadia and Jasmine. For not knowing our daughter. Our daughter, Nadia repeated, savoring the words. She's perfect, isn't she? Strong, independent, brave, everything we wanted to be. She's you, Richard said. She has your eyes, your strength, your kindness. And your stubbornness, Nadia added with a weak smile. She doesn't believe. She deserves to be loved. Just like his father. Jasmine watched the interaction, her heart torn between the joy of seeing them together and the sadness of knowing it was too late. Sit down, Nadia instructed Richard. We have little time and much to say. Richard pulled up a chair, and for the next few minutes, 40 years dissolved. They talked, laughed, and cried. Nadia spoke of life in Lebanon, Richard of the empty years in New York City. Jasmine learned about her parents' romance, the secret meetings, the shared dreams, the plans destroyed by prejudice and tradition. Remember the song? Nadia asked at one point. The one you played on the guitar. Fairuz, Richard confirmed. Zahrat al-Madayan. I still know how to play it. Sing it for me, Nadia requested. One last time. Richard hesitated, then began to sing softly in Arabic. His voice choked with emotion. Jasmine was surprised. She hadn't known he spoke the language. As the melody filled the small room, Nadia closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face. For a terrifying moment, Jasmine thought she had passed, but then she saw the subtle rise and fall of her chest. Promise me, Nadia said when the song ended, her eyes still closed. Promise you'll take care of each other. No more wasted time. No more regrets. I promise, Richard said immediately. Nadia opened her eyes and looked at Jasmine. Habibti? Jasmine glanced at Richard, then at her mother. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. I promise, she finally said. Nadia smiled, looking years younger for an instant. Then I can go in peace. Don't talk like that, Jasmine pleaded. The doctors did their job, Nadia gently interrupted. Now it's my turn to rest, but first to Richard in the drawer. There's something for you. Richard opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a photo of him and Nadia, young and embracing in Central Park, radiant with happiness. I kept one for myself, Nadia explained. To remember it was real. It was real, Richard confirmed, his voice hoarse. It was the most real thing I've ever lived. They spent the next hours together, a family reunited for the first time. Nadia dozed intermittently, waking to share one more memory, one more story. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting medications. As the sun began to set over Beirut, Painting the room in golden hues, Nadia asked to speak to Jasmine, alone. Richard kissed her forehead gently and left, promising to wait outside. "My dear daughter," Nadia said when they were alone, "I know this is hard for you." "I'm fine," Jasmine lied. "No, you're not, and it's okay not to be. You've learned in 2 days that your father is alive, wealthy, and that your whole life was shaped by a secret. It's a lot to process." "How did you do it?" Jasmine asked. "Keep all this hidden for so long?" "For love," Nadia answered simply. "I loved Richard too much to ruin his life. I loved you too much to let you grow up in the shadow of scandal. Love sometimes means letting go. But now he's here." "Yes," Nadia smiled. "Fate has its own plans. You working in his home. It can only be the work of forces greater than us, or a cruel coincidence. There are no coincidences, Habibti. Only paths that take longer to reveal themselves." Jasmine held her mother's hand, memorizing every line, every mark of time. "I'll miss you so much," she whispered. "I'll always be with you," Nadia promised. "In every act of kindness, in every moment of courage, in every choice made with love. And now you have Richard too. Don't push him away out of pride. Learn from my mistakes. What if it doesn't work out? Then at least you tried. It's more than we had the chance to do." Note: as per your instructions, I have provided only the translation without any additional commentary. They remained silent, mother and daughter, until Nadia fell asleep again. Jasmine quietly stepped out, finding Richard in the hallway, speaking softly with Fatima. "How is she?" he asked anxiously. "Tired," Jasmine replied. "But at peace, I think." Fatima approached. "Jasmine, we need to talk about the arrangements. The Imam has been notified. The family has been informed." "Not yet," Jasmine interrupted. "She's still with us." "But we must be prepared," Fatima insisted gently. "It's what she would have wanted." Richard cleared his throat. "I can help with the costs." "Everything is already arranged," Fatima replied, studying him curiously. "Nadia left specific instructions months ago." "Of course." "She did," Jasmine murmured. "Always taking care of everything." They spent the night at the hospital, taking turns by Nadia's side. Richard shared more stories of the past. Jasmine recounted childhood memories. It was as if they were trying to compress 40 years into a few hours. By morning, Nadia was visibly weaker. Her breathing was shallow, her moments of lucidity rarer. The doctor pulled Jasmine aside. "It's a matter of hours now," he said gently. "We've done all we can. She's not in pain." Jasmine nodded, unable to speak. She returned to the room where Richard held Nadia's hand, whispering in Arabic. He seemed to be reciting poetry. "Remember," he was saying, "you loved Khalil Gibran. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed. For love is sufficient unto love," Nadia finished in a faint voice, opening her eyes. "You still remember." "I remember everything," Richard assured her. "Every word, every moment, every promise I didn't keep." "Shh," Nadia quieted him. "No regrets now, only gratitude for what we had, for what we built." She looked at Jasmine. "For her." Jasmine stepped closer, taking her mother's other hand. The three of them were connected, a circle finally complete. "Sing for me," Nadia requested. Together. And they sang, an old Arabic lullaby Nadia used to sing to Jasmine. Richard stumbled over some words, but the melody was there, etched deep in his memory. As the last notes faded into the air, Nadia Farah took her final breath, a gentle smile on her lips, finally at peace. The silence that followed was absolute. Jasmine felt as if the world had stopped turning. Richard still held Nadia's hand, silent tears streaming down his face. "She's gone," Jasmine said needlessly. "No," Richard corrected softly. "She's free." The next few days passed in a blur. The Muslim funeral rites were swift, and soon Jasmine found herself at the cemetery, watching her mother's body be lowered into the ground. Richard stood respectfully apart during the prayers, but Jasmine could feel his presence, an unexpected anchor in her storm of grief. The Lebanese community turned out in full. Nadia was loved, respected, Women she had dressed for weddings, children she had helped feed, all came to pay their respects, and they all cast curious glances at the distinguished man who clearly didn't belong but whose sorrow was undeniable. After the funeral at Fatima's house where they had gathered, an elderly woman approached Jasmine. "Your mother was a special woman," she said. "She kept her secrets with dignity. But we always knew there was someone. The tall man, he's the one, isn't he? The father you never knew." Jasmine nodded, unable to trust her voice. "She loved him until the end," the woman continued. "Now I understand why. He has kind eyes. Sad, but kind." Later, when most of the visitors had left, Richard approached Jasmine in the small garden of the house. "Thank you for letting me be here," he said. "She would have wanted it," Jasmine replied simply. "What will you do now?" Jasmine hadn't thought about that. Her life in New York City seemed to belong to someone else, to another time. "I don't know," she admitted. "I need to settle her affairs here, the house, the hospital bills." "Let me help," Richard offered again. "You already have," Jasmine said. "The jet, being here, it's enough." "No, it's not," Richard disagreed. 40 years of absence can't be repaid with a plane trip. Jasmine, you're my daughter. Let me act like a father, even if it's late." Jasmine studied him. The powerful man she'd met just days ago seemed to have aged years, grief-marked. Him as much as it did her. "What happened to Victoria, to your business?" "Victoria's with the lawyers." "The business, and my brothers are handling it. None of that matters now." "It does," Jasmine insisted. "You ruined your life because of me." "No," Richard corrected her. "I built a false life on the destruction of the real one. You just showed me that, and gave me a chance to make it right." "Some things can't be fixed," Jasmine said, echoing Victoria's words. "But they can have new beginnings," Richard argued, "if we let them." Before Jasmine could reply, her phone rang. It was a New York City number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Jasmine?" A hesitant female voice. "It's Catherine. Catherine Thompson. Well, I guess I'm your sister." Jasmine nearly dropped the phone. "Catherine? I know it's strange for me to call, but Jonathan told me what happened. About you, about our Gran, about Nadia. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Jasmine managed to say. "Listen, I know it's complicated, really complicated. But when you come back to New York, if you do, I'd like to talk. Jonathan too. We're not blaming you for anything, we just want to understand." "I want that too," Jasmine admitted. "Is our father there?" Catherine asked. Jasmine looked at Richard, who watched anxiously. "He is. Do you want to talk to him?" "Not yet," Catherine said quickly. "I need time. But tell him we're thinking of him. And of you. You're our sister, whether you like it or not. That means something." After hanging up, Jasmine relayed the conversation to Richard. He seemed both hopeful and apprehensive. "They're good people," he said. "Better than I deserved as children." "Stop that," Jasmine said abruptly. "Stop punishing yourself. Yes, you made mistakes. Yes, you caused pain, but wallowing helps no one. My mother forgave you. I am trying. Your children seem willing to try too. Stop living in the past and start building a future." Richard looked at her in surprise. Then a small smile appeared. "You sound just like her when she was mad at me." Despite everything, Jasmine found herself smiling too. She taught me well. They spent another week in Lebanon, tying up loose ends. Richard insisted on paying all the medical and hospital debts, despite Jasmine's protests. Together, they emptied the small house where Nadia had spent her final years, each object telling a story. In a box at the back of the closet, they found treasures. Letters Richard had sent in the first months after Nadia left, before she changed her name and disappeared. Photos of Jasmine as a baby, a child, a teenager, all carefully organized, and a journal, page after page in Nadia's careful handwriting. "I think this is for you," Jasmine said, handing the journal to Richard. He flipped through it gently, his eyes filling with tears at every page. "She wrote to me," he murmured in wonder. "All these years, she wrote letters she never sent." Jasmine left him alone with Nadia's words, stepping into the small backyard. The sun set over Beirut, painting the sky in the same colors she remembered from childhood. Her mother was gone, but she had left behind more than grief. She had left a chance. For healing, for connection, for family. Her phone rang. It was Margaret, the housekeeper. "Jasmine, thank goodness. How are you? We're so sorry about your mother." "Thank you, Margaret. Is everything all right there?" "Well," Margaret hesitated. "Mrs. Victoria took her things. The house is empty. The staff is worried. They don't know if they still have jobs." Richard didn't say anything. "Mr. Richard isn't here, is he? No one knows anything. Jasmine, when are you coming back?" Jasmine realized she hadn't thought about that. Go back to what? To the house where she worked as a cook, but now knew was her father's home. To a life that no longer made sense? "I don't know, Margaret, but tell the others not to worry. Richard will take care of everything." After hanging up, she found Richard still reading the diary, his face marked by complex emotions. "We need to go back," she said. "There are things to sort out in New York City." He nodded, closing the diary carefully. "Jasmine, I read she wrote about you. Every achievement, every struggle. She wrote as if I were there to see it, as if one day I'd read it and meet the daughter I never watched grow up." "And now you have." "Now I have," he confirmed. "And I know I missed the best part of my life. But I also know it's not too late to get to know the incredible woman you've become." The flight back was different. The weight of unspoken words between them was gone. They talked about Nadia, about the future, about the complications waiting for them in New York City. "You don't have to go back to the house," Richard said at one point. "I know it must feel strange. You can stay wherever you like. I'll arrange—" "Where will you stay?" Jasmine interrupted. Richard seemed surprised by the question. "I hadn't thought about it. A hotel, maybe. Until Victoria decides what to do with the house." "That's ridiculous," Jasmine said. "It's your home, too." "It was," Richard corrected. "Now it's just a building full of lies." Jasmine thought for a moment. "Then let's turn it into something else. A place of truths, no matter how hard they are. A place for new beginnings." Richard looked at her with something close to admiration. "You do that? Come back there with me?" "Not as your cook," Jasmine clarified. "As your daughter. If that's what we're going to be to each other, let's do it right." "I'd like that very much," Richard said softly. When they landed in New York City, a small crowd was waiting at the airport. Reporters had somehow uncovered the story. Camera flashes erupted as they appeared. "Mr. Thompson, is it true you have a secret daughter?" "Jasmine, how does it feel to inherit a fortune? Where's Victoria? Has the divorce been confirmed?" Richard put a protective arm around Jasmine, guiding her through the crowd. Security appeared out of nowhere, clearing a path to the waiting car. "How did they find out?" Jasmine asked, stunned. "Victoria, probably," Richard sighed. "Or my brothers. It doesn't matter. The truth was bound to come out." The driver took them not to the mansion, but to a discreet hotel downtown. "I thought this would be better," Richard explained, "until things settle." But Jasmine shook her head. "No, no more hiding. Let's go home. Let's face this, head on." Richard studied her for a moment, then instructed the driver to change course. The mansion was indeed empty, just as Margaret had said. Victoria had taken not only her personal belongings, but also several pieces of art and furniture. The empty spaces were glaring, physical reminders of the wreckage left behind. "Feels fitting," Richard observed. "Empty as it always was, only now it's visible." Jasmine walked through the house with new eyes, no longer as staff but as a daughter. It was strange, uncomfortable, but also right, somehow. Margaret appeared, clearly relieved to see them. "Mr. Thompson, Jasmine," we didn't know what to do. Mrs. Victoria said everyone was fired, but then the lawyer called saying no, no one is fired, Richard assured. Everyone who wants to stay can stay. But things are going to change around here. Change how? Margaret asked cautiously. Richard looked at Jasmine before answering. This house will have life again. Truth. Family. The way it always should have been. In the following days, Jasmine's life became a whirlwind. Lawyers wanted to confirm her identity for inheritance matters she hadn't asked for. Journalists called constantly. Relatives of Nadia from Lebanon sent messages of support and curiosity, but the hardest part came when Jonathan finally appeared. Jasmine was in the garden, trying to find a moment of peace, when she heard footsteps. Turning around, she saw a man who was undeniably her brother. Jonathan had the same eyes as Richard, the same jawline she saw in the mirror. "Hi," he said simply. "Can I sit?" Jasmine nodded, tense. Jonathan sat carefully, clearly searching for the right words. "I spent a long time angry," he began. "At my father, at you, at the whole situation. Then I realized I was angry at the wrong thing. You didn't ask to be born, you didn't ask to be a secret. You're as much a victim of this as I am." "I don't know if victim is the right word," Jasmine replied. "Maybe not," Jonathan agreed. "But you're not guilty, either. Catherine and I talked a lot. We wanted to hate you, you know. It would have been easier. The intruder who destroyed our family. But then we thought, what family? Our parents barely spoke for years. We lived in different countries by choice. We were a family only on paper. I'm sorry," Jasmine said, unsure what else to say. "Don't be," Jonathan surprised her. "Maybe this is exactly what we needed. An earthquake to tear down the rotten structures and build something new. Victoria wouldn't think that way." "My mother is hurt," Jonathan acknowledged, "and she has every right to be. But deep down I think she's also relieved, free to live without pretending to be happy." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jonathan said something that would change everything. "I want to get to know you, really, not as my father's secret daughter, but as my sister. Catherine does too, if you're willing." Jasmine felt unexpected tears. "I'd like that very much." Jonathan smiled, and she saw traces of Richard in him, but also something uniquely his own. "Great. Because Catherine is already planning a dinner. She's a lawyer, loves organizing things. Fair warning, she'll ask 1,000 questions." "I'm used to questions," Jasmine replied, thinking of the past few weeks. "I bet," Jonathan laughed. "How are you handling everything? The media, the sudden change?" "One day at a time," Jasmine answered honestly. "I'm still processing that. A month ago I was just a cook, and now you're a Thompson," Jonathan finished. "For better or worse." Richard appeared at the garden door, clearly surprised and hopeful to see the two together. "Jonathan," he said cautiously. "Dad," Jonathan replied, the tension palpable. "I'll let you two talk." Jasmine began to stand. "No," they both said at once. "You're part of this," Jonathan explained. "No more secret talks or decisions made in the shadows." And so, the three of them sat in the garden, where it had all begun, trying to build bridges over 40 years of absence and lies. Weeks turned into months. The initial media scandal died down, replaced by other news. Victoria got her divorce and a considerable settlement, moving to a penthouse in Paris. Richard's brothers eventually accepted the situation, more interested in keeping the business running than in family drama. Jasmine found herself in a strange position, no longer an employee, not yet fully family. Richard insisted on legally including her as an heir, despite her objections. Jonathan and Catherine welcomed her with surprising warmth, the three discovering they had more in common than blood. One afternoon, 6 months after Nadia's death, Jasmine found Richard in the office, now reorganized and free of traces from that fateful night. "I need to go back to Lebanon," she announced. Richard looked up, concerned. "Is something wrong?" "No, but I left things unfinished. Friends, the house, a life I abandoned abruptly." "Are you coming back?" The question carried poorly disguised fear. "I am," Jasmine assured him. "New York City is my home now. You are my family, but I need to properly close that chapter." "I understand," Richard said. "When you go, can I come with you? I'd like to visit Nadia's grave properly, bring flowers, talk to her." Jasmine smiled. She would have liked that. The second trip to Lebanon was different, without the urgency of grief, without the weight of revelations. Richard and Jasmine traveled as father and daughter, still learning the rhythm of this new relationship. At the cemetery, Richard knelt before Nadia's grave, placing white flowers, her favorites. "I'll take care of her," he promised the silent stone. "I know it's late, but I'll take care of our daughter." And thank you. Thank you for raising her so well, for being strong when I was weak. Jasmine watched from a distance, giving him privacy. When he returned, his eyes were red, but at peace. She knows, Jasmine said softly. Wherever she is, she knows. They visited. The old house now sold to a young family. The new owner let them in, curious about the previous residents. This house has good energy, she said. I feel it was deeply loved. It was, Jasmine confirmed, very loved. When they returned to New York City, they found a surprise. Jonathan and Catherine had organized a dinner, not just for a family, but including Victoria. I hope you don't mind, Catherine said to Jasmine, but we thought it was time for everyone to talk civilly. Victoria was different. Paris had suited her. She seemed lighter, younger somehow. Jasmine, she greeted with a nod. You look well. You too, Jasmine replied cautiously. The dinner was surprisingly calm. Victoria had processed her anger and reached something close to acceptance. I spent 40 years blaming a ghost, she said at one point. Now I realize the problem wasn't Nadia. It was trying to force love where there wasn't any. Richard and I were victims of our family's expectations. We created victims too. She looked at her children. I'm sorry for that. We all make mistakes, Richard said. Yes, Victoria agreed, but some get the chance to fix them. She turned to Jasmine. You seem like a good person. My children care about you. That's enough for me. It wasn't full forgiveness, nor friendship, but it was a start. After dinner, while the others talked, Jasmine stepped onto the terrace. New York City glittered below, millions of lives and stories intertwined. Hers had taken unimaginable turns. Richard joined her. What are you thinking about? How strange life is, she replied. A year ago, I was serving canapes at parties like this. Now is where you should have always been, Richard finished. I'm sorry it took so long. Stop apologizing, Jasmine said with exasperated affection. I've forgiven you. More importantly, Mom forgave.
You?
Now you need to forgive yourself. I'm trying, he admitted. Every day gets easier, especially when I see you with Jonathan and Catherine, the three of you together. It's like seeing what could have been. No, Jasmine corrected. It's seeing what is. We can't change the past, but we can choose the present. Richard smiled, the kind of smile she was learning to recognize, full of paternal love he could finally express. Your mother would be proud, he said, of the woman you've become, of your strength, your kindness, your ability to forgive. She would be proud of both of us, Jasmine replied, for finding each other, even if it took so long, for choosing love over resentment. They stood side by side, father and daughter, gazing at the city that had both torn them apart and brought them together. The past couldn't be changed, but the future stretched ahead, full of possibilities. A year after Nadia's passing, the E family, now reconfigured but functional, gathered for a tribute. In the mansion's garden, they planted an olive tree, a symbol of peace and renewal. Victoria came from Paris for the occasion. Jonathan brought his wife and young daughter. Catherine introduced her new boyfriend. Even Richard's brothers appeared, their initial greed replaced by genuine curiosity about their newly discovered niece. As Richard spoke about Nadia, about love, loss, and redemption, Jasmine studied the faces around her. This wasn't a conventional family. It was a patchwork. 5 complicated relationships, intertwined stories, and healed wounds. But it was her family. When it was her turn to speak, Jasmine talked about the mother she had known, not the woman she had loved and lost, but the one who had raised a daughter alone with dignity and grace. She spoke of forgiveness, of how love sometimes means letting go and other times means holding on against all odds. My mother believed in fate, she concluded, that everything happens for a reason. It took me a long time to understand, but now I see it. Every choice, every secret, every pain brought us to this moment. Not perfect, but present. Not without scars, but healed enough to move forward. Together. Later, as the sun set and the family dispersed into small conversation groups, Richard approached Jasmine. I have something for you, he said, handing her an envelope. Inside were documents for a newly established foundation, the Nadia Farah Foundation for Refugee Women. I thought we could honor her memory by helping women in similar situations, Richard explained. Women who've had to leave everything, behind who need a fresh start. What do you think? Tears streamed down Jasmine's face. I think she would love it. We'll need someone to lead it, Richard continued hopefully. Someone who understands the needs, who has compassion and strength. Are you offering me a job? Jasmine laughed through her tears. I'm offering a purpose, he corrected. If you want it. Jasmine looked around, at the newly planted olive tree, at her imperfect but loving family, at the father fate had taken 40 years to give her. Yes, she said simply. I want it. And so, from an Arabic phone call answered at the wrong time, or perhaps exactly the right time, was born not just a family reunion but a legacy. The Nadia Farah Foundation would become known for reuniting families separated by war and circumstance, for granting second chances, for believing it's never too late for love. Jasmine never worked as a cook again, but she often found herself in the mansion's kitchen, preparing the dishes she'd learned from Nadia. Richard sat at the counter, just as he had 40 years earlier, tasting and chatting. Jonathan and Catherine brought their families. Even Victoria, during her visits to the United States, would drop by occasionally. This was a family built on loss and lies, but held together by something stronger, the conscious choice to love despite everything, to forgive the unforgivable, to create beauty from the ashes of the past. Somewhere, Jasmine believed, Nadia was smiling. Fate, after all, had always had its own plans. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope this journey of love and reunion moved you. What did you think of Jasmine and Richard's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how it made you feel. Don't forget to like and especially to subscribe for more touching stories like this one.